Howdy! Greetings, folks. It is I, the Solo Gamer, and give the rushed setup here. I was kind of scrambling to get my rig up and ready and kind of forgot where I'd left my mic. Sorry. But that should all be fixed now. And this video is a one-off Helldivers video with...
Helldiving. Take command of the galaxy's liberation.
Mostly just down to me wanting to comment on some shit that's been going down recently online. And usually, when I want to do something where I need to talk about external topics, I usually play Helldivers. So, complete secondary objectives. Oh, looks like we're invading. It looks like we're attacking this place. Yeah, I'm in agreement. Let's go hit the freaking automatons. Oh well. But yeah, I wanted to talk about some recent bad stuff that's been going on, and I figured I'd play a little Helldivers and go over my thoughts real quick. It's swim season out here in the desert, so spent a good chunk of the day in the pool, which was nice. But unfortunately, for certain other areas of the nation, such as the Carolinas and Texas, the summer has brought torrential rain and horrible flooding, which, yeah, no, that has not gone well. Alright, bust out my thermite. Oh yeah. I like that new electrical grenade launcher. It is very, very cool. I'm still working my way up to... Oh, you know what? That's a good point. I need to check something real quick. Do I have enough to get my... Yes, I do. I can get the guard dog. Yay. Now we're talking. Alright. Guard dog K9. No, not that. That. And give me my armed resupply pod. And let's get to business. Now, as I was saying, Texas and the Carolinas, I believe South Carolina, but I don't remember exactly. I know the Carolinas got hit. Experienced massive torrential rain recently. Especially along the Guadalupe River in Texas. And along several rivers in the Carolinas, there's been massive widespread devastation. Now, this is an unfortunate but often expected event in this time of year, as those areas are typically pretty well known for severe flooding and a lot of bad damage from storms. And, I mean, I lived in an area of Texas that was much drier. Before I moved out to the desert out here to the west, I did live in Texas for the first part of my life. But I lived on the farther west side, which was much more desert and a lot less, shall we say, prone to flooding. But the truth of the matter is,
there's something here.
The closer you get to the coast, the worse the flooding danger gets. That's just the inherent nature of the business. And along the Guadalupe, which is usually a very tame river, all things considered. Ooh, this is the scythe. Oh, I picked the wrong one. That's okay. I got enough firepower to make this work. It ain't no biggie. But along the Guadalupe, it's a pretty tame river sometimes, but the thing is, it has a relatively low, and I mean low, propensity towards
Dropping a pin.
towards flooding if there's a lot of rain. Now, rain there is usually pretty consistent, but it's usually short term. You get a bit of a storm and it goes away, a bit of a storm, it goes away, a bit of a storm, it goes away. This was torrential. This was non-stop, repeated, constant storm activity for like 6 hours straight of a level that hadn't been seen in close to 100 years.
Automaton outpost destroyed.
Melted right through the leg. Instantly deleted his ass. Yeah, see, I like this little electro grenade launcher. Very efficient at bot disposal. Anyway. First target is these things. But as I was saying, the storms have done horrific damage. And it's tragic, and my heart goes out to them because I had family who used to live in that area. I know how bad it can get. But apparently people who don't know how bad it can get are a bunch of leftist scumfucks who decided to make it political and blame a bunch of children because the area didn't vote for Kamala Harris. I'm not joking. Destiny is one of the people who did this. There are others. It's easy to find on X if you're looking for it. There was a pediatrician. She is now fired. Good. But this is one of those things where I feel like the California fires, I felt horrible for the people who lived in that, who had to deal with that. What I had zero sympathy for, though, was the people who actively tried to deny that it was Governor Gavin Newsom's incompetence that led to that catastrophic failure. What happened in Texas, though, was a natural disaster that could not have been prevented, and they did try. Like, it is well documented that the people in that area made a concerted effort to try and warn others that this was coming. And unfortunately, what happened was the warnings were ignored in some cases and too late in others. That is, as much as I wish I could say otherwise, that is sometimes the case with these flash floods. You can't do much to stop it. You just got to try and get out of the area as quick as you can. But beyond that point, the actual biggest issue and my biggest complaint about this is that it has really shown people for who they are. While almost everybody on the center or the right was praying and offering aid to go help these people who were in dire straits, the left was using it as a way to score brownie points on the political scale. And it's backfired horrifically, which I am glad for. But that doesn't change the fact that one way or the other, this is not going to end well for a lot of people on the left, because it's going to be used. Most likely, you're going to see a lot of this stuff cropping up in campaign ads very quickly. And unfortunately, it's going to be one of those cases where it's like,
Say hello to democracy. Hellbomb request approved and on its way now.
but I feel like this is the moment where you see people for who they are. And while many people were sharing their sympathies during the fires, most of our anger went towards the incompetence that caused it to turn into the catastrophe it was. Newsom, Bass, the politicians, the people in charge. We didn't turn our anger on the actual victims, we turned them on the incompetence responsible. No one's responsible for this. Every effort was made to try and warn people ahead of this catastrophe. Over a dozen alerts over a day ahead were sent out, and when the flash flood hit, alerts were sent immediately. But in certain cases, there's nothing you can really do to prevent it. And that's where I think we see the real problem right now is politics has become so toxic that people would prefer to score brownie points to boost up their team than they would be to admit that there's any kind of problem with their side or that there was any kind of issues at all. Like for all that I say about Trump, and to be fair, I do like the guy. I disagree with him quite frequently. I think he's got a good idea with the immigration. I think his approach needs a little bit more refinement. I do disagree with him suggesting that we should look into providing amnesty for farm workers and stuff, because that undercuts the entire theme of his work. This is like your whole reason you got elected was because people wanted you to solve an immigration issue. Well, solve the immigration issue. But to that point, I do think there's ways you could fix that. I do think there's ways you could address it. What I think is the issue now, and what I think is going to become a much bigger issue in the future, is that there is no middle ground anymore. It used to be there was left, right, and center. Now there's just left, more insane left, right, more hardline right, and there is the few people who are actually in the middle find themselves sort of stuck trying to figure out how to manage things. Elon's now talking about opening up his own political party, and to be fair, I understand his intent. I do. I do not think it's the right approach. Because while I understand the intent behind it, doing that's only going to give the Democrats another tool against the Republicans anyway, and I don't feel like that's going to help anyone in the long run at all. I think what he should do, and I heard their meeting. I heard their meeting soon to discuss it, but I think him and Trump need to have a major sit down and just get down to brass tacks about what needs to be done and why they're at such cross paths. Because Elon was a Trump booster. He was a huge supporter. Now he has a very definitive disagreement with Trump, and it's getting worse by the day. I think an issue needs to be addressed, and I think the best way to address it would be for them to meet and have it out. But that's the thing that bothers me the most about this whole scenario. Why is it so toxic? And I have to admit, I'm part of the problem. Because my hate for the left is undenied and is completely unrestricted. My viewpoint on them is, to quote Cyrus the Virus from Con Air, they're somewhere between a migraine headache and that white stuff that accumulates on the side of your mouth when you're really thirsty. Unpleasant and unwanted in every sense of the word. And I don't know if that's the actual quote, but he compares a very, very bad dude to some absolutely horrible shit that he thinks is absolutely beneath him. But as a general rule, my hatred for the left was based on the fact that most of it came from Obama. I'm going to be upfront about that. I saw him, like a lot of people did, as a solution, as a hope that maybe he could find a way to branch all the division that had plagued the country for years. Instead, he just made it worse.
Sending down equipment package.
And in economic terms, just ruined the country, like in every possible way you could name. Then we had Trump, and Trump tried to rebuild. Unfortunately, ran into a lot of trouble with other issues, such as, issues within the Congress, issues with the Democrats, issues with everything. Now we've had to deal with 4 years of Biden, and Biden led straight back to Trump because he was so awful that he, for lack of a better term, basically handed Trump a victory on a silver platter. And that's, I don't mean that as a cynical statement. I mean that as a literal statement. If not for how awful Biden was, I don't think Trump would have won. And then they put Kamala in there, and she had less chance of winning than Biden. And everybody was shocked she lost. It's like, how? She was awful. She was an absolutely horrid caricature, an empty suit of the worst kind. But between Biden, Kamala, Obama, and the left-leaning media and how prominent it is, yeah, you could say that my hatred went from just not agreeing with him to utter revulsion and hate. And I mean, fire burning down below type hate. So at the end of the day, I wonder if that isn't replicated. I see that replicated on the other side constantly, and it makes you wonder, how far have we fallen that we've become so mired in these ugly politics that there's nothing we can do to reverse it. And unfortunately, I don't think we can at this point. I think it's going to take massive, and I mean gigantic level calling to wipe out some of the more prominent problems within this country and get things back down to a level. And I think a big part of that is, one is, I've made the joke about make asylums great again. I'm beginning to think we need to have like a complete reimagining of asylums. Like we need to start throwing people in there in like mass numbers now, because the left in particular, but the right too in some cases, is getting more and more unhinged by the day. And sometimes I worry that, you see it everywhere now. But this flood has sort of unlocked the overall, viciousness that we thought was just the far left or the far right. No, it's becoming mainstreamed almost. And I genuinely find that utterly horrific. But that's a big part of the problem, is just the blind hatred. And a lot of that is the media's fault, I will also say. There's a reason why I refer to MSDNC and Rachel Mad Cow the way I do. Because that is what they are. She's an insane ideologue. Joyless Ann Reed was a lunatic. Al Sharpton's a grifter and a shyster and a charlatan. Bailey Mistral is the dumbest smart person on the planet. How they can consider him intelligent is the most insulting thing to intelligence I've ever heard. But the problem we have with this country is that we used to have faith in our media, and now our media has become so corrupt and so ungodly horrific that that trust is gone. It is utterly eroded, blown away, evaporated. And I say that with all the charity I can muster. But that boils it down to the absolute bare minimum. That we are basically, a divided society, and the media is what divided us, and which is why stuff like X and other things was so important, because it broke the system out of that media shell and started letting other voices be heard. The problem is, a lot of people still put too much faith in that media system, and I wish I could say that was just the way of things. But no, that's a generational issue too. You find that the older generation takes most of their cues from certain news networks, be it Fox or MSNBC or whatever you want to call it. But the sad thing about the whole thing is there is an undeniable and almost unreasonable amount of people who now only get their information from online sources, and another set, especially older set, that only gets it from traditional sources, and that divide is getting more and more and more palpable. Which is why, while a lot of people were whining and bitching about Trump's lawsuits against the media, I cheered for them. Because I feel that is an absolutely necessary action. I think Trump's lawsuits are an utterly and undeniably needed, course correction to force the media back into something more reasonable. Now, I will say that as a general rule, I do not like lawsuits being used frivolously. I feel like litigation is an overdone thing in the country as a general rule, and that's just me. But I do feel like there is a need and necessity to actually have these companies held to account. And I feel like a big problem with that is also that the justice system needs mammoth refinement and reform on its own, because now you have judges acting like they can supersede the law of Congress and the power of the presidency. And I think a lot of people are starting to get real fed up with it. And I think what's going to happen is eventually there may be a movement where people want, judges, held to higher account, where if they are doing something that is clearly outside of their authority, they should be punished for it. Like that judge who got arrested for trying to shelter migrants. Like, I, for one, again, like I said, I agree with the need for immigration reform. I agree with the need for deportation at a mass scale. I am not convinced that it's a single point solution. There has to be more to it. But by the same token, a judge trying to illegally shelter migrants against a federal order? No. You don't have that authority. They don't. And the fact that they tried and she got arrested for it, well, I feel no sympathy. That's on her. But I feel like a big problem with our situation right now is that we have a Democrat Party in free fall down to almost single digit, and I mean that, I'm not joking when I say that. When I say they're down to almost single digit public support, it is close to that limit at this point. Last I saw was down like to 15% and dropping. So I think that there is every bit of chance that, given enough time, the Democrats are going to get so desperate they may take actions that are beyond the pale. Like, I mean, I am convinced that there's going to be some sort of catastrophic event that derails the Democrats, and that's when they're really going to lose their marbles and just go completely off the rails. Now, maybe I wind up being wrong. Maybe I wind up that it all levels out and the Democrats get control of things and stop being stupid. I very much doubt that, but you never know. But I believe that unless we as a country and as we as a people sort of simmer down and start actually talking instead of just screaming at each other, I don't think this is going to work. And you know what? I'm going to be 100% fair. I'm part of the problem. my rage and my anger at the Democrats, at times it may be cathartic to me, but I don't know if it always helps. There are some people who deserve it. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's on both sides. There's people on both the left and the right who deserve to get called out for their nonsense. But the fact that it's just ordinary people who have such vehement hate for each other. Yeah, no, I don't see that as a... I don't see that as a valid thing. I see it as an absolutely untenable situation. And unless we are going to start making real progress on how to fix that, I don't see that as being anything but a long-term downside.
Max empty!
When did I run out of fucking grenades? Ugh. I love this canine. Don't even have to fight half the battles. Just sit around and let him do the job.
Max empty!
Just trying to get to my target zone.
Found something!
But I mean, you look at how things are right now. Trump's like 50-50. Yes, he's done the big immigration action and has been doing a fantastic job, in my opinion, of just tearing apart the immigration issues that have plagued the country for years. But now we have another side of the coin where, I mean, that's great and all, but does that solve the problem with worker availability, access to manpower, labor, all those other things that have to be considered? It's one thing to want to deport everybody who's just not legal. That's fine. I get that. But you have to either have another way for those people that we need to come back in to do the jobs, or you need to consider making carve-outs for people who don't, who aren't a threat, and that we might need to actually do, like, proper work. I also think we need to hold employers accountable, because that's the other side of the coin here, is that these people were being exploited because they were cheap labor. And a big reason why a lot of them were coming over was because they had very few prospects in their own country, so they were coming to America, and then the farm owners would use them as cheap labor, because even though it was still pittance compared to what a skilled laborer might make in an office job, it was still vastly more than they were getting for their actual work back in Mexico. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it is the...
Max empty!
Come on, go down, you bastard.
Sending down equipment package.
Max empty!
Oh, crap. It bounced off the railing, didn't it? Yes, it did. My bad.
Reinforcements have been launched.
Democracy has
That's what it is. I landed right back on top of my target zone. But yeah. I find myself kind of torn, because on one hand, I love ripping into the left constantly for their stupidity and their insanity. But I'd be I'd be neglecting reality if I didn't point out that the right does it too. Now, while we tend to focus more on the politicians, this was aimed at people who had nothing to do with any of that. And that's kind of why it backlashed so heavily was, why are you blaming kids who have nothing to do with the event because you're mad at Trump? And a lot of the people who did that deleted or tried to get rid of the evidence. You know, the internet never forgets, so these people, you know, got hammered. Like I said, one lady got fired. It's the first of many, I'm sure. But I feel like that sort of brings out the bigger problem. We're so hateful that our initial reaction is to be cruel and mean. I don't see it as a good thing. I see it as an example of just how bad the situation has gotten between all of us here. And I feel like we could do so much better if we would just stop and be a little bit more considerate. But I don't know. I very much don't think that's possible anymore. I think the only way it's going to start, you know, leveling off is if there's real consequences for these actions.
Mission at 30 minutes remaining.
Yes, I'm aware. Almost there. We're making good progress.
Another triumph for managed democracy. May liberty guide your safe extraction.
You may proceed to extraction when ready.
Tagging map.
But anyway, we're almost done with this video. We need to get to extraction and get back out again. But again, this is more me feeling, I don't know, a sense of sadness over how bad things have gotten.
Max empty.
To be fair, like, hearing about those kids in Texas was the thing that really hurt. Because they were just kids. They were little girls at a Christian camp. Just, you know, trying to have a good summer. And this flood came and wiped them out. And a bunch of scumbags had to fight for brownie points among their leftist friends to be the first #1 douchebag. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was, as far as I was concerned, that's the kind of thing that should be like instant banning. But I don't know. That kind of thing is also the thing that, as a free speech advocate, I kind of have to tolerate. You know, it's the way of things. But that's really a question of what makes a person think that that's okay. You know. I tell you, when I saw what happened in Los Angeles, when I saw the California wildfires, I saw what happened there. I was genuinely sad because I had family there once. Now they moved. They got out of California before it got too bad. But I remember seeing that city and seeing, when I was younger, going there and seeing it for the magnificent city it was. And now it's a travesty what's left of that
Proceed to
place.
extraction when ready.
It is an utter and complete travesty. San Francisco, San Diego, San Barbara, they're all just horrible remnants of the once great cities they were. And much of that is down to its leadership. I don't know if I can necessarily blame the people, except that they keep voting in these incompetent morons, and then they act shocked that their cities are in ruin, that Chicago is a war-torn cesspit of a city, that New York has a mass exodus that's abandoning it, and then they elect this psychopathic socialist who literally is just repeating Karl Marx. And all of a sudden, businesses are telling them, we're leaving. We're taking billions of dollars and we're going. Because you're going to elect this stupid retard and put him in charge. And that's the big issue. It's like, you can't... How do I treat this with any kind of deference when this is what the hell is going on? And I realize the guy's a young... He's an intelligent... He's an up-and-coming star in the party. The guy's an idiot. No real-world experience, no actual idea how the world works. He literally quotes Karl Marx like he thinks it's going to work, and he's going to leave the city bankrupt and abandoned because he's not smart enough to actually understand how things function. I'm sorry, but you're not going to convince me that anyone who voted for him understood the world or how it's going to operate. And the funny thing is, he didn't get the working class. He got all the rich elite liberals. Yeah, he didn't even get the working class people he claims to be a champion of. They voted against him. Nightfall. Keep them at a distance so they can't come after them.
ETA T-minus 10 seconds. Clear landing zone.
This is Pelican 1. I have visual on the extraction zone. Pelican 1 landing sequence initiated.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the whole situation out in the Carolinas, out in Texas, especially East Texas, is real bad. And I say that as someone who used to live in Texas and knows those areas pretty well. It's bad, and it's not getting any better. At least not at the moment. They've already got 100 dead out in Texas. Still getting the counts out of the Carolinas. No idea how bad it's going to get. So if you can help people who need help out there, you know, provide aid, support, relief, whatever you can, but try to not let this be a moment to score brownie points or be political about it. This is not the time for it. We can argue about fault when the bodies are laid to rest and the situation's contained. For now, I just want the people to be safe and to get home in one piece when all is said and done. Anyway, I just wanted to get my thoughts out on that. Nice. I love how no matter what you do, you come home covered in just utter gunk and crap. It is always funny. Alright. Sickle. Notice how I know something. How each version just has more gold and bits and bobs attached to it. Like the double edge has more stuff attached to it. I'm going to pause it here. This will be uploading today on my main channel. channel, so it should go live on either the 7th or the 8th, depending upon when it gets processed out. But I will see you all next time, and if you want to join me for some other stuff, I'm doing Fear 2, Death and Death Stranding right now, bits and pieces at a time. And you should be seeing more of those coming up in the next few days. Solo Gamer signing out.